JDM KOs Gilbert Burns with a broken arm, Dustin Poirier slays the God of War, and Sean O'Malley keeps the Suga Show rolling. Your UFC 299 review starts right now. It is Friday, April 5th. I'm Jack with Octagon Analysis, your source for MMA news and commentary on all the major events happening in the greatest sport on planet Earth. On this edition, we'll be discussing the events of UFC 299. But first, congratulations on finding your way to the first ever episode of this channel. You've already supported my work just by tuning into this episode, and I hope you continue to tune in for the content we have coming up. But you came here for some MMA talk, so let's get right into it. UFC 299 took place recently, and it did not disappoint. We had 14 fights on the night in total. 5 ended early with a finish, and 9 went the distance, ending in a decision. The 2 finishes on the early prelims came to us courtesy of Robelis Despain and Michel Pereira. Despain made his UFC debut in devastating fashion, knocking out Josh Parisian in 18 seconds. His professional record now stands at 5 wins, 0 losses, with all 5 wins coming in the first round by KO or TKO. This guy is a scary individual, folks. Just watching him walk into the octagon, I knew this was not going to go well for Josh Parisian. And I can't wait to see him fight next, if they can find some lunatic to fight the guy. On the regular prelims, Curtis Blaydes put a stop to the hype train of Jailton Almeida by earning a hammer fist KO early in round 2. That is Almeida's first loss in the UFC and snapped his 15-fight win streak, 6 of those coming since his signing to the promotion. Curtis Blaydes got back into the win column and after the fight called for a rematch with Tom Aspinall. And we'll see if he gets his wish. On to the main card. Petr Yan earned a unanimous decision win over Song Yadong, getting his first win since October 30th, 2021, when he beat Corey Sandhagen. And Michael Venom Page made his much-awaited UFC debut and won a unanimous decision over Kevin Holland, in a fight that left a lot of people wanting more. Now, the fight in and of itself was not boring. People were calling this a boring fight immediately after, and I completely disagree. There was some beautiful striking going on. The evasiveness of both fighters was just fun to watch. It was top-notch, but the big problem was just the hype leading into it. Everyone who has seen anything the UFC has put out in the last few weeks saw the highlights of Michael Venom Page. They saw the tornado kick KOs. They saw all of that stuff. So the expectations were through the roof for what he would do in the UFC. So anything less than what people have already seen was going to be a disappointment no matter what. The fight was fine by itself. It just won't make it onto any of MVP's future highlight reels. Needless to say, it will be interesting to see who the UFC matches MVP up going forward. This is a guy that they want to use in the right way, and who they match him up with is going to be very crucial to that. We'll be covering the rest of those main card fights in today's segments. And we'll start things off with the absolutely stellar performance in the main card by Sean O'Malley. What a dominant performance this was. In fact, this was one of the most dominant title defenses of all time. Sean, of course, won the fight by decision, and on the scorecards, he had 50-45, 50-45, and 50-44. The significant strike totals were 230 to 89. And to be honest, probably 20 of those strikes would have knocked out any normal human being. But we learned just as much about Cheeto in this fight as we did about Sean O'Malley. We learned that he is not a normal human being. That knee in round 2 was sickening. Joe Rogan described it in the moment as a baseball bat smashing a watermelon, and I couldn't think of a more accurate description for that. You could turn that fight on, put on a blindfold, and just listen to the fight, and you would know the exact moment that Sean landed that knee on Cheeto. But I am really thankful, though, that he didn't get knocked out, because a 5-round performance like what we saw for Sean goes so much further in building his legacy than another knockout. We know he has knockout power. That's clearly established already. But could he win a fight and be just as dominant over 5 rounds? This is the only time we've seen Sean go past round 3. Most expected rounds 1 and 2 to go his way. Cheeto is notoriously a slow starter in fights, and Sean gets off to a fast start. So we knew that rounds 1 and 2 were probably in the bag for Sean already. But the big question was, could his footwork, could his elusiveness, could his precision striking be sustained for all 5 rounds? And it was. Obviously, he got cracked a few times towards the end of the fight, but he still won all 5 of those rounds and was never in any real serious trouble. Now, I had this question of his longevity in a fight going into the Aljo fight, but obviously we didn't get an answer there. But the coaches are doing something right with Sean. And good on him for being coachable, because what they're doing, the system they have running for his skill improvement and development is absolutely working. And I would just compare this fight that we saw, looking at Sean in rounds 3, 4, and 5, compare that to when he fought Chris Moutinho. That was a 3-round fight that pretty much went the distance, but Sean looks levels above where he was in that fight when we saw him fight Cheeto. And it really showed his evolution as a striker as a whole. He didn't just box Cheeto. He was a well-rounded mixed martial arts striker, using every single weapon that he had at his disposal on the feet to do damage. Now, the call out at the end of the fight, I hated it. I hated it. The double champ thing is getting way out of hand. Volk absolutely deserved to fight for 2 belts. When Izzy went up to fight Jan Blachowicz, that made a lot of sense. But then you've got Islam trying to fight Leon before he's even defended the belt once from someone in his weight class. You've got Ilya trying to fight for the lightweight belt before he's ever defended his title. And now we've got Sean calling for one against Ilya, trying to move up to featherweight to get 2 belts. The double champ opportunities should not be commonplace. It cheapens them. And I am really passionate about this point because I don't want the sport to get cheapened. I want this to be something special. When you get a champion versus champion fight, that should be something worth celebrating. You blow it up. You go to the max to promote it. They shouldn't be happening twice a year. This should be a rare opportunity to see 2 of the best in the sport go at it for a belt. Now, there's obviously one big exception to that being Conor McGregor, but no one had the hype that he had at that point in his career. He was a phenomenon that the sport probably will never see the level of ever again. It was a once in a universe opportunity to have McGregor where he was. And all of these other guys might be trying to replicate what he had, but they're just not him. Obviously, the follow-up call-out, kind of the secondary one, was Merab. And obviously, this is the fight to make. And this is a fight that's really important for Sean, too. The one part of his game that has been critiqued previously that will continue to be critiqued until he beats Merab is how can he perform against an elite wrestler that will pressure him. Now, of course, we had the fight with Aljo. Aljo is a high-pressure, high-level cardio wrestler. And the big question was, how is Sean going to be able to stop the takedowns? Does he have the range? Does he have the footwork to stay out of his reach? And obviously, he got through round 1, and into round 2, he knocks him out. But his critics will just chalk it up to a lucky punch. Those who would want to detract from Sean's legacy are just going to call it a lucky punch. So for him to beat Merab, to take 2 of the best wrestlers in the sport, really, regardless of weight class, and beat both of them soundly, that is going to do a lot to silence those critics and really solidify who he is as a champion. Our next segment, Dustin versus Benoit Saint-Denis. Now, I gotta say, I was on the edge of my seat for this fight. I have now watched Dustin Poirier in multiple fights get hurt, but then take his timing and accuracy to a different level, to a different universe after he's been hurt. When you hear the commentators say how hurt Dustin is, it probably means that the other guy is going to get knocked out soon, because that's the way that he fights. When the pressure is on him, when he is in that position where most people are losing focus, where most people are swinging at air, he is dialed in. I've never seen another fighter do this to that kind of level. Dustin asked for a scary opponent, and he definitely got it. And I have to say, I love watching Dustin fight, but I hate how he fights. I wish I could just go through one where I wasn't a nervous wreck the entire time the fight is going on, because Dustin Poirier is one of my top 3 fighters of all time. I love how he fights in the octagon. I love his style. I love the action-packed fights that he gets into, but I also hate how it makes me feel because I just can't help but worry for him. I love the guy. I love how he fights. I love the person he is outside the octagon. But Dustin, can you please just stop getting hurt in these fights and win another way? But nonetheless, it was an amazing fight. And what that fight did for him moving forward, it got the attention of the champion. Islam, shortly after the fight, reached out and expressed his desire to fight Dustin next for his next title defense. Now, it seems wrong, but it actually makes sense when you think about it. Dustin is 3rd in the rankings right now. You've got Justin Gaethje and Charles Oliveira ahead of him in the rankings, but both guys are fighting at UFC 300. So if either one of them loses, or if they take a lot of damage and have to spend time recovering before they can get back into a training camp, that's going to put Islam's next defense really far down on the timeline. And he doesn't want to wait that long. He wants to fight soon, and he does want to fight often. He wants to stay active. And so Dustin does make sense as his next fight. And that does actually make a lot of sense for Islam as well, strategically, when you think about it. If I'm Islam and I know that my striking, yes, is next level, but really my wrestling and my pressure is what's going to get me to a lot of these victories, yeah, I want to fight as many strikers as possible. If I've got Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier at the top of the rankings, next in line for title fights, I want to take those. I want to take advantage of what I think might be a mismatch style-wise for me. Even though, yeah, they are dangerous strikers. They have knockout power for sure. But Islam has dealt with that before. And his wrestling does give him the edge over both of those guys by a lot of people's calculations. If I'm Islam, I want my next 2 title fights to be Gaethje and Poirier. And by taking this Poirier fight a little bit earlier, that puts him in position to do that. I do love, though, that Dustin is getting another shot at the title. As I mentioned, he's one of my top 3 fighters of all time, so I want to see him get the belt. And when the betting lines for that fight do come out, I am betting the house on Dustin Poirier by guillotine. Jack Della Maddalena KO'd Gilbert Burns in their matchup. In the 3rd round of that really, really close fight, JDM landed a perfectly timed knee leading to the stop, but not before he broke his arm early in the fight. JDM's manager posted this X-ray to social media just a few days after the fight. He said that this happened sometime early in the fight. They're not sure exactly where. And I'm not a doctor, but that is not supposed to look like that. The durability and resolve of some of these fighters is just mind-blowing. But that's just who JDM is. He will fight anyone, anywhere, anytime, literally. And he proved that after the fight when he called out the one guy that no one else wants to fight, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Both of those men are currently undefeated in the UFC, and I have to imagine that Dana is already seeing how he can make that fight happen. Finally, before we wrap things up today, I wanted to take a moment to say just how happy I am to see that Mark Coleman is alive, well, and on his way to recovery after his hospitalization. If you aren't up to date on that story, I'll leave a link in the description where you can read up on it. But Mark, if you somehow end up seeing this, know that you truly are a hero in the eyes of MMA fans everywhere, both for what you did inside the octagon for the sport and for the pillar in your family that you are outside the octagon. Long live the legend and rest in peace to Hammer. And that brings us to the end of this episode. If you're watching on YouTube and you'd like to support the channel, you know what to do. Just press all those cool buttons down below. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, a review would be amazing. And thanks for tuning in. We'll be right back at you with another episode coming up soon. Thanks for watching.